All right, folks, I guess we can call to order. Connie, we have any public comments?
We do not.
You do not. Sam, I guess we have you at the end here, but so you don't have to hang around if you don't want to. Maybe we can go ahead and take it out of order and let you go first. What do you think?
Sounds good to me.
All right, let's do it.
You're no easy. Didn't have to ask him twice on that one.
We made one adjustment to the flyer, so I'll pass these
All
around.
right.
We caught one little mistake.
Thank you, sir.
So I know at graduation last year, we began our clear bag policy. Looking at a lot of schools, especially in the Austin area and Metroplex area, and our big crowds we get, especially at the stadiums. We thought it'd be prudent to explore the implementation of clear bag policy at Tiger Field, Bronco Field, and Wilson Kersey for all of our BISD athletic events. We followed the same template. I talked to a lot of different athletic directors, and this is already very prevalent in college stadiums and NFL stadiums. It just gives us another measure of safety on our big crowds, that we can make sure that people aren't bringing in something in the stadium that we don't want in the stadium. We did change a little bit from what other school districts. We did a clear plastic backpack with a student ID. So if our students decide that they want to purchase a clear backpack, we would allow that into the stadium for students. But other than that, it just gives a specification. We would have this posted at outside all events. We take ticket at all these events with gate workers, so we ensure that only clear bags would be allowed in the stadium. So we just figured, I met with Jill Ross, Mike Morgan, Ben Smith, Doug, and Pete to talk about, the safety parameters and get everybody's feedback and make sure everybody's on board. And the only change we made was the clear plastic backpack, but this will be phase 2 of Belton ISD implementing clear bag, and then this would be kind of our run, and then see how much we want to add on to other sports later on in the future.
As far as that backpack's concerned, what if, like at a football game, if you've got like people in the band and they're already,
If they're participants, the clear bag policy does not,
Okay.
so cheerleaders, Magic Bells.
they're all exempt from that?
They're all exempt from that.
All right, any participants?
They'd
okay.
just be coming through the ticketed gates.
I understand. Any reason why, you mentioned large crowd, any reason why we wouldn't expand that to allow it, for the basketball games and baseball games and softball?
We looked at basketball, softball being our next phase.
Okay.
The gym is really hard because we have kids that never leave the building with backpacks.
No.
And so that's another realm we were looking at, but we have kids that don't ever leave the gym. They come straight, and we start basketball games sometimes, depending on the year, sometimes at 4:30, sometimes 5 o'clock, so kids come straight from school in there. So they really don't have anything to do, put their backpacks. To go to Bronco Field, Tiger Field, or Wilson Kersey, they have to actually leave the school building. And so that was our consensus, to start here, and then look how this goes and possibly expand into the gyms, baseball, softball in the future.
So it hadn't been ruled out, we're just gonna see how it goes.
Yeah, this is gonna be our kind of first implementation. Graduation was phase 1, this will be phase 2, and then we would
Okay.
see how that goes and go from there. But Pflugerville ISD, when Belton goes up there for their game next year on Thursday, it's gonna be clear bag. Leander ISD's clear bag, Round Rock's clear bag. Just no one in this area has gotten to that point yet. And I just think it's gonna help our gate workers, help our workers, our cops, just to make sure we don't have things in the stadium
Sure.
that we don't need.
Matt, any thoughts on that? I mean, obviously you've been exposed to this.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about it. I think their plan is really wise on phasing it in. I think y'all did a great service last year, starting it out at graduation and continuing that moving forward. But then I think it does become a little tricky in the performing arts centers and stuff, are really where it becomes tricky as well. And so being able to see how it goes this year, study it, see what kind of communication is going to work best for parents and everything, and continue the phase-in process makes a lot of sense.
Right.
But the safety measure, or I always think about the why behind it. Why do we want to do it? And the safety measure just
Sure.
resonates with me.
Of course, I guess something is better than nothing if we start into the basketball and the just all those gym sports, and then the field sports, the baseball, and sometimes softball has a pretty good crowd. I know baseball does as well, especially if we start getting into playoff situation, that kind of thing. A lot of folks there.
Yeah, when we started the initial discussions with all of us in the room, I brought up, why don't we do it for all outside venues the first year? The principals thought it'd be better to phase it in this way, and I agree. We also need to calculate through the first phase and how much extra security we're gonna need to check those bags, and that'll be part of our process with our budget the next year on extra security, extra police officer. But, you know, right now we do a really good job. We have a cop at every game, whether it's sub-varsity or varsity, so that would just be the next phase.
How are we gonna communicate that to the public?
So we're gonna start with season tickets. When they come to renew season tickets for Belton football, they'll get this. We're gonna post it out on social media. It's gonna be in our information package to all opposing teams. So I'll send it to their principal, their athletic director, ahead of time, so they can let their fans know. We'll have signs posted way out by the parking lot before they even get to the stand.
Walk 200 yards, and, you gotta go back to your car.
And then Wilson Kersey was an easy one, cause there's no way to get there unless you take a vehicle, so we still use that for soccer, so we wanted to add that one in too.
Okay.
I think again, the things that you did last year with graduation, we'll build off of that and make sure Sam's working with Elizabeth and our communications team and talk about the phasing in of this, and that it's all part of safety measures for our kids. And we're gonna have to go multiple formats, right? And whether it's flyers, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Facebook, whatever we need to do, trying to just get the message out.
Right.
But I don't think we'll have a lot of pushback as long as it's for the right reasons.
And looking at, you mentioned the other venues, and looking at the other venues that have done it, what sort of obstacles have they seen?
You know, most of the, like Leander ISD, Pflugerville, they're just doing it at their district stadiums. So they said after the initial first game, they didn't have a lot of pushback. You know, everybody just understood. And they put out the information really early. That's why I'd like to get the information out this spring. And then that way they didn't get a whole lot of pushback.
Right.
Once people understood and were well informed, then they didn't have much of a problem. And it's a good way, just a bonus note is our booster clubs or our schools can sell clear bags like we did for graduation with the B or the Bronco on there. And it's another way for us to for them to sell something cheap at cost, that we provide those parents with something to bring to the games.
Okay, all right.
So oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, okay.
Would this just be for the high school events at those venues, or even when the middle school teams show up?
Yes, it would be for every BISD event that we take a gate for
Gotcha.
at those venues.
Okay.
Instead of our workers having to know, well, are we doing it or we're not doing it? Just
Right.
rip the Band-Aid off and we're doing it
Okay.
at these venues.
Okay. I'm thinking back to the soccer game a couple of Fridays ago when I'm carrying my cinch bag with my spare blanket in there. I'm like, that would not. Basically, I'm forced to take that out and carry it in.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So 2 questions, swim center's on your radar as
Mhm.
part of that too, because it gets pretty crowded. in there.
Absolutely.
But actually, I have a more specific question, so medically necessary bags, right?
Yes.
So, are we training these people who are at the gates exactly what medically necessary means, and we're not gonna have families be challenged? For
So we're-
example, like a colostomy bag, you're gonna have sharp
Mhm.
scissors, you know, you're gonna have lots of supplies in there, our diabetic families, whatever it may be, our feeding tubes for our
Mhm.
kiddos.
So we'll have a cop stationed at the gate who will be trained on what those are.
Okay, what about
Okay.
district employees, why are we not gonna train district?
I will train them
employees
too,
as well?
but I'm just saying that the extra, they'll be trained as well, all of our gate workers, so we go through training in early August where all of our game workers who are gonna work any event for us, and we'll go through training at that point, but we'll also have a cop there located to just help out with that
I think
process.
it's a really good point though, because I do think that we wanna do it in a gentle manner and make sure that everybody feels welcome, even though questions might come up this first time around, so we'll definitely keep working through that.
And they'll also be told if there are ever any questions in doubt, they need to radio the administrator on duty. And because what they do when they pick up their gate box, they give a radio, and the administrator on duty gets a radio, which is one of either the head football coach, girls coordinator, myself, Coach Patrick, or one of the assistant coordinators at that school, and they'll get radioed if they have any questions to ask.
Okay. I mean, I know it's a lot to
Oh,
think
no,
of, I
you're good.
appreciate
We,
it, so.
we've been doing something similar to that for varsity football games,
Mhm.
where students were not allowed any bags, and if a student did have a diabetic bag, or we had some tags, and that could be tagged where all of our workers and administrators would know that bag had been checked and had been approved. So we've been doing that to a degree, only at varsity football, I think that would just have to extend to all events now.
That just become part of our ticket gate workers where they could tag the bag, his bag has been checked, it's good.
And that alerts anybody up in the stands that sees the bags and one of the things been checked.
Mhm.
Okay. Anything else, Russ?
That was it, thank you
Chris?
so much.
Gentlemen, anything else you want to add?
I would
to
just
that?
say one other thing, you know, you think about clear bag policy and safety, you automatically think about weapons, but you'll see a significant increase in lots of prohibited items. I mean, you think about what do adults bring into football games, especially like playoff games and things like that. I mean, when we, you find alcohol, you find tobacco products, sometimes you have other prohibited items that come in, and clear bag will help with a lot of those types of issues. So not just weapons and that type of safety issue, but also just all kinds of prohibited items coming into your facilities.
Plus, it just give everybody a measure of, I feel a little safer knowing that there's nothing like that in this facility.
Or it came in somebody's pockets.
Right.
I mean,
Or in their
Yeah.
Absolutely true.
Right.
Yeah, we're not there yet. I mean, with,
Right, I know, but
you know,
to some extent, it's a false
Yeah.
sense of security because a lot of stuff can still get in.
sure. Right. Short of having a metal detector and all these, I mean, that's just, yeah. Okay. Sam, anything else?
No, I would just also build on that, just we are a little behind on other school districts in this area, and this will get us on par with everybody else, but our eventual goal is to get where every sporting event will be there on a clear bag policy.
And on that note, what do you see as a phase in? I mean, what sort of time are we looking at?
So I'm thinking this year we'll phase in Tiger Field, Bronco Field, and Wilson Kersey, and the next year we'll add all outside venues that we charge a gate at. You know, tennis, we never charge a gate, so it's gonna be hard to monitor that one. But for baseball, softball, we'll get them on clear bag, as well as, middle schools are a little harder just because we don't have the same presence of workers there. So I think the next phase will be baseball, softball, and visit the gym issues, as different school districts tackle the gym issues. I have not seen a school district implement the clear bag on the gyms yet, unless it was, I saw a couple of inner city Dallas schools do it, but they also have metal detectors.
I mean, could we have something in lines of, we would prefer that you not bring?
Oh, we have a list of what
Right.
they can't bring right now, we don't allow certain things, and we have those signs posted. But we hadn't gotten to the specifics of anything you bring in has to be in a clear bag.
Okay, understood, okay. Matt, anything else on that?
No, I appreciate y'all and your ideas. I think, it's a good discussion for us to get into. So I think your questions and comments were great.
Okay.
I'm
Sam?
sorry, this will eventually go to fine arts events and other events. I mean, I know that's not in the immediate phase, and I'm not trying to make
Yeah,
your
you're
life
fine.
miserable.
Here's the way I would state it, is I think we have to study it this next year. I would say this: if I go to an event at UT, I have to have a clear bag in some of those event venues for fine arts events. And I think that we have to be cognizant of the fact that this is going to continue around us. That doesn't do anything for me when people say, well, everybody else is doing it. But if it's gonna keep our students safe, that does make me sit there and go, we should probably explore that. So I'm looking to learn from the other districts that have started this phase in already, see what they're doing and how it's going, and then for us to study it, talk with the band directors, and really get their sense of things too, because if it's really about student safety, then I think it's our duty to study it. I really do.
Thank you.
With the objective being that it would be district-wide at some point in the future.
Yes.
Okay.
I will say this, for anything we take a gate for, even marching contests at Tiger Field and Bronco Field, they'll be under clear bag as well.
Well, Sam, you can stay for the rest of the party if you want.
I'll go and see my 2.5-year-old.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you have a 2.5-year-old ready to see you.
Yeah.
So. Thank you,
y'all.
Sam.
All right, thanks, Sam. Okay, we'll see you later.
Appreciate that.
Sure.
Todd, Mike, you guys have anything this evening? Other than maybe, okay, all right. Man, this is our first, meeting here with you, so, looking forward to it.
I'm excited.
Any particular format that you wanna address these things?
No, sir, I thought that I would do my best to let y'all continue working through things the way you've been doing them, and then I'll chime in along the way, but I watched a few online, but I need to see what all the approach that we
Well,
wanna take.
I think the objective for us was to take a piece of the policies and procedures that we have in the district and sort of just digest them as we go. I mean, sometimes it may just encompass just reading the thing and see if everything makes sense, and if we're in line with what's going on, and then maybe discussing it.
Mhm.
Of course, today's, looking at the notice or the agenda, we're looking at BBC legal, BBD legal. One is talking about board members' vacancies removal. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. You know, I went through this thing, I underlined some things for myself. A resignation's gotta be in writing, somebody's gonna resign. And then we're talking about residency, if you're elected and then you move out of your, not just the district, but if you move out of the area that you represent, then you've gotta relinquish office. The procedure talks about, how you fill a vacancy, what we have to follow in that regard. It's pretty self-explanatory. If you're a former board member and then you wanna seek employment, you gotta wait a year. And then there's on page 2, there's the things that you can be involuntarily removed for.
Mhm.
And then reason for removal, one thing that I do wanna discuss a little bit further is on page 4, temporary replacement of board member on military and active duty. That the board, if, for example, if Chris was in the military and he left to the Middle East, then we have to hold his position open, and then we can appoint somebody to serve temporarily. Which obviously is a good thing, considering the fact that, I mean, we don't have anybody in military service now, but being where we are, you know, near
Yep.
Fort Hood, that could happen at some point in the future. The training, all that's pretty self-explanatory. There's gonna be some changes that take place with that, with legislative session this past year, and some of the things that we have to do in terms of training. One thing that, Matt, I wanna get your input on, page 2 of 5 at the top, where it says annually, the State Board of Education shall commend those board superintendent teams that effectively implement the Commissioner's Education Trustee Improvement Evaluation Tool developed under the Education Code, or any other tool approved by the Commissioner. In your experience in the past, have you had a situation where you've been at a district where the superintendent and the board were commended by the Commissioner for that?
I have not, and I think it's an interesting one, because from my understanding, the tool recommended by the commissioner has changed over the past few years, and I think whenever we have, similar to the clear bag policy we talked about a few minutes ago, the phase in and seeing how things work is where just some districts are with that. And the same thing can be applied to this idea of the evaluation tool. When I was reading that, I had to go back and take a look at it, whether or not they were trying to mean the evaluation of the superintendent or the evaluation of the board, because they do talk about a self-evaluation of the board as well. And I think in that spot right there, they were talking about the evaluation of the superintendent, from what the way I understood that.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. The other piece of it, I think, that's important is that I think, from my perspective, we have to develop an evaluation tool when it comes down to the superintendent evaluation tool. And it has to be based on the goals of the school district and what the board is setting forth as the goals. And also use the best practices, so you'd be able to take a look at what the commissioner provides as a sample and use other districts around to develop that evaluation tool. So I think it's a hybrid is what I would say is probably the best way to go about it.
What the idea being, when I was reading this, you know, like the reporting here that's on the same page, is how do we as board members and as a group, how do we go about improving ourselves individually and the way we function as a group?
Yeah.
I mean, how do we do that? What do we need to do to get to that point?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that's what, about the board self-evaluation in this too. I think there's a process that they say effective boards should go through that process. I know TASB has spent a significant amount of time over the past probably 4 years now, maybe 5 years, in redoing their training and their self-evaluation tool for the board and their XG governance process, they call it. I think that stands for exceptional governance. I think that you can go through Lone Star Governance, which is the TEA version of all of that, and they have an evaluation tool as well, a self-evaluation tool, and I think there's other organizations, CRSS, the Center for Reform of School Systems, I believe, who also does work like this. So I think there are multiple things that we could do, and we could study them as a team of 8 and say, what's gonna work best for us as a team of 8 right now. But I think the process is one of the most important things, and I think that's what you're alluding to. I think effective teams regularly assess how they're progressing and how they're working together. And if we're not making any movement forward, but we all feel like we work together really well, something's amiss. Or if we're blazing the way forward, but there's a lot of dysfunction on the team, then something's amiss. And I think that you have to find whatever system, whatever evaluation tool that will help us make sure that both of those things are moving.
Of course, if you're self-evaluating, I mean, that's pretty self-serving. I mean, and the reason I'm talking about this is because if you look at the framework for school board development.
Yeah.
And looking at the goals there, all right? How do we become better trained, for lack of a better term, to accomplish the framework, to be within that framework? I mean,
Yeah.
how do we do that? How do we get there?
My perspective on that one is, I mean, I felt like there was a little bit of a disconnect in this one, because I feel like some of the things that were listed in this exhibit in here might be a little bit outdated, as opposed to.
Yeah, it was 1996. I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so I feel like there's a refresh that needs to happen. I mentioned the TASB XG governance. I think it would be wise for us to talk a little more with the whole board about bringing someone in to do some of this training together. I know we need to do a team of 8 training coming up, and I think getting into the idea of goal setting and evaluation of the superintendent and evaluation of the board is a thoughtful way to go about that. And I think that you attend to that over the year, and you invest some time in some retreats, and you attend to that, and then you end up having a process at the end where the current board and the superintendent feel real comfortable with how we continue to work together as a team of 8, with the board functioning in their role and the administration functioning in their role, but also how we, I think most importantly, work through the most challenging situations too, because it's all, with the easy things, it's not a big deal usually, it's when the challenging situations pop up. So I think we need to spend some time, and there are consultants that help us do that through retreats.
Okay. Rosie, Chris, you guys have any thoughts on that? On how we become better trained to work within this framework and accomplish what this framework is designed to do?
I just wonder if ahead of time, like we have the TASB summer training program. You know, I go like this, sounds good, right? Because
Yeah.
there's so many to choose from, right? And I wonder if there could be more deliberate planning ahead of time for maybe what each board member should cover, because it's overwhelming to look at that program sometimes. And sometimes it's pretty easy to see which one you should go to, but, I don't know, just a thought.
And along the same lines, and I don't know if we can or not, if this is allowed, Matt, but could we have, and I thought I had read something in here, could we have where somebody comes and speak to us more often, as opposed to us having to go to San Antonio or Austin or wherever, and then, you know, go in there and rush to get these hours and do that, as opposed to having someone come here, and then as a group, we can have a discussion with the speaker at that point, if it's something that is dear to us here in this district, and be it more specific to what we need and what we're looking for in accomplishing those goals.
Absolutely.
As opposed to just looking at this list and there's like 20 places that I can go, and I just pick one and I walk in there, and then I mean, the issue doesn't even come up in the district ever while you, in your tenure. Or it may come up 2 years later.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the great things we did to start the superintendent search process is we did have somebody come in and we did spend 3 hours or more, I don't know, it felt like maybe longer.
I was just gonna say, probably a lot more.
And, but I mean, that was a great opportunity for us to really kind of focus on the matter, a very important matter at hand, and to really sit down and talk through, well, what do we each really care about with this issue, and how do we want to move forward, right? And so, I don't know how frequently, right, but I think, easily once a year, right? I think we ought to do something like that around whatever the appropriate topic is. But, if it turns into 2 or 3 times a year or whatever, right?
Sure.
I mean,
Well, we've got this thing coming up with Jennifer, right? On the
the
school-
workshops,
On the workshop,
or the,
on school finance, right?
right.
So if there's other things that, and Matt, you can help us with that too, because, I mean, you're the expert here.
Yeah.
So you tell us, hey, this is where I think that you guys need to work on, so we can get some training and have a better understanding of what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, I think Chris's point is a really good one. I think that investment that you had at the beginning of the superintendent search, I hope you feel like, resulted in a positive situation for you all. But I think that's, in talking about bringing the consultants and stuff in, so example with the TASB XG governance or with CRSS, they will work with you and come in, maybe it's every other month, and do a couple hour session and be able to say, let's narrow things down and figure out what it is that the board or the team of 8 really need to work on together, and let's dedicate 2 or 3 times to doing that. And I think from my perspective as a new superintendent coming in, I think investing in those things at the beginning makes a whole lot of sense to me, because the more we can work on functioning as a team of 8 and talk about our roles and responsibilities, I think the better that we can become. Where I see this policy committee and eventually the whole board possibly helping with that is, what we could do is we could bring a couple of them in and have them present to us their services that they offer and talk about that to the policy committee, and then take that to the board for a full board discussion about how we might do things in the future.
Good idea.
I think you all, in your operating procedures that y'all, I know, spent a lot of time on, I was really encouraged to see a couple of things that you said in there, in one of the minutes that I read, that you were very interested in engaging in some quarterly workshops, but you wanted to wait until the new superintendent came on board and have some more discussion about it. Well, I think we're at a good spot to do things like that now and really talk about how can we form together this team so that we're all pointed in the same direction.
Okay. Yeah, when you mentioned a moment ago, Matt, that this may be a little bit old, and this thing was developed in 1996, or adopted in 1996, and then revised in 2012. There hasn't been a revision since then?
I think we need to do a double check on that a little bit. And when I brought that up, and I just want to share this just for food for thought, I was in my recent district that I left, I was at a NSBA conference, National School Boards Association, and had a dialogue with a board member at that, and it was very interesting to me that some of the things that they were talking about in NSBA, it didn't feel like our policy or our training had caught up with yet. And I think sometimes we feel that same thing with going to TASB or SLI in the summer and things like that, that we're like, oh, this sounds really good, but when I go back to this document that's in our policy, that doesn't really sound like the role of the board, and these two things don't match up. And I think that's where a consultant can help us with that, is to navigate some of that dialogue a little bit, because I do think that the role of school boards is evolving. And I think the Senate Bill 1566 training that's mandated by the state is a perfect example of that. It very specifically says what your role is trustees in setting goals and helping to attain those goals regarding student achievement. And in the past, that was not even talked about in a lot of board training, that was part of your role. And so I think we need to have those dialogues as a team to really discuss and come to some kind of firm agreement about how do we want to function as a team of 8? What is the role of the board and what is the role of administration? Let's just, that phrase, clear is kind, let's just be clear about everything to make sure we're all on the same page.
Well, I mean, if you wanna put it simple, it's like, okay, we want everybody to perform at a, you know, we want every campus to have at least a B,
Right.
okay? So, how do we get trained to make sure that we're implementing goals that are gonna get us there, and then implementing policies that are going to achieve those goals?
Yeah, the alignment of all of that is the exact thing
Right.
that we're searching for. I'll give you a quick example of a story. So I'm officially listed as a TEA trainer for Senate Bill 1566. And I went to the TEA trainings to be certified to do that, and I think I actually have to go through another one to recertify. But what was interesting about that to me is that you had this section that all school board members were mandated to do within a certain amount of time, right? And you had to get that going. But it felt like it was separate from the goals that you'd already developed as a school district. So we have goals that are listed on our district website right now. But then we have this thing that TEA had said, or our Senate bill had said that we have to do, and then the training says, here's how you have to do it. And those two things don't align. And so I think we need to spend some time after the training piece is one of it, and we can learn some things through the training, but then we have to be able to sit down and make sense of it. And that's the part that I don't feel like we, as teams of 8 across the state, spend enough time doing sometimes.
Well, sounds like our next workshop.
Right?
Right.
Well, can I add to that? Because I know sometimes Chris and I have like looked at numbers at a school board meeting and we've gone, ooh. So, but not in a critical way.
Right.
We're kind of like, oh, what are we supposed to do? But
Right.
we
How can we
don't
help?
know. So we have to look at the data that we have and not be afraid of it, not use it as judgmental data,
Yeah.
but as data that is a team of 8, we can support our administrators and teachers, but without overstepping our boundaries, right?
Right.
So, but I think we've always been afraid to look at the data, but then there it is in front of us sometimes, and like I said, we go,
Yeah.
Well, part of
I'm
that,
circling numbers.
part of this framework we're
don't
talking
separate
about,
us in the meeting.
it states that we should have a working knowledge of how to read these things, you know, how to read this data. And I, you know, I struggle with that because it's pretty complicated, you know, in reading that data. And what is it telling me? If I don't have a working knowledge of it, how can I ever implement a policy that's gonna help turn that around? Okay, I'm putting the cart before the horse.
I mean,
So,
I'd almost like to see us put something in between that data coming out and the development of the district improvement plans.
Right.
Right, like that's kind of the time frame, right? So that, okay, great, we can see and digest that data. Not that I necessarily wanna be writing a district improvement plan, right, myself, but just to get the context, right, so that we're going into that and can better support, you know, both the inputs and the outcome.
I need to understand what the data's telling me.
Right.
I need to understand where our weaknesses are and where our strengths are, right?
Mhm.
You guys have any input on that? I mean, any thoughts about that? Mike, I mean, you've been, you know, you've taught and, I mean, you see the big picture more than we do. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I do think, and I've heard comments throughout this policy, this committee process that it is kind of involving y'all in the process of developing these ideas, but I don't know, that's something that's, I know in my departments, we're starting to deal with a little more data maybe than we're used to on certain things. And I think probably, you know, getting that to y'all, I think from our department is getting it to y'all like in the Friday report and things like that, so that when we do follow back up, y'all have seen it beforehand, you're not being presented to it at the same time that ideas are being given. Here's the data, here's our ideas, what do you think about it? So I don't, from a standpoint of board training and developing the district plan, this is all pretty new to me too, but from a standpoint of within the areas I work in my department, I think we definitely need to use the tools we have to get that information to y'all, allow y'all to follow back up with questions about what does this mean? And then as we come back and talk about it, is how do we want to alter either our policies or just protocols, or, you know, y'all have that information, y'all have had time to think it through before we make those decisions. Is that kind of what I'm hearing, and kind of
Yes.
what has
Yeah.
been a good part of this process?
And if you're having difficulty with that, how do you think we feel?
Yeah. Right.
And you're in the midst of it. So, the SLI to me is not, it's that, when we go there, it's not sufficient,
Mhm.
okay? Your idea about talking to the folks, you know, the experts out there, maybe having someone come in here and give us a talk on different things, I think that's the way to go.
I think that would be good. I think one of the things that, you know, as we continue to work through the spring and learn more together and stuff, but one of the things that I do think we're gonna need to get into a discussion is about setting direction for a school district. I like to think of the board has to be able to help us set the vision and the values of the school district. Like, where are we going and what are we gonna be really tight about as a school district? Like, what do we believe? What are those core values that we believe? And then our administrative team, our job is to help make that stuff come to life, right? But to try and do some of these things without a direction that we're all heading, and it'd be kind of like, Mike comes from the coaching world, it'd be kind of like not having a game plan at all and just going in on Friday night with whatever each of the defensive and offensive coordinators have come up with there.
Sometimes that's what it seems like too, for the fans sitting in the
Right.
stands.
Um,
I can assure you that wasn't
gonna
the
say.
case.
That wasn't the case though.
Right, that wasn't the case, but it just seemed like it sometimes.
So I think, you know, that idea, I think we've got to wrestle with some of that coming up, and I think we'll probably need some facilitation and guidance to do that, but I think that could help us.
Now,
You know, each school does their plan, I
Mhm.
get that, right? But, like I see Southwest, those teachers and administrators are killing themselves. And you walk in that school and you just feel love, you
Mhm.
do, you
Absolutely.
feel love with the kids and you, but, and I wish there was something that the board could be doing so that that wasn't happening, so I think sometimes those policies even, I think we have to go a step deeper than just talking globally for the district. I think we have to look at each individual school and what we're asking those people to do, and what can we do as board members to help with that?
Right.
Without overstepping our boundaries, but we are asking a lot and they are doing everything, you know, and then if we're gonna get a number back that the state says, well, they're a C minus, well, what a slap in the face for
Right.
everything that they've done.
Right.
But I don't think we know about it
Yeah.
a lot of times.
Okay.
you know, Matt, one time, Robin and I were talking about when we initiated this policy committee, thing. I told her, I said, I wonder how I would feel in drafting these policies is if we all went as individuals, just hypothetically, we all went as individuals and talked to each principal on the campus and said, what can we do to help you from a policy perspective?
Mhm.
What can we do? So, to me, that would make us much more effective if we're listening to the folks and, you know, to the boots on the ground, and they're telling us what they need so that we can be more effective with what we do in drafting things. And I think maybe you could help us with that. You had this public comment thing that opened up.
Yes.
And this framework here, it tells us that we have to engage the community and know what the community is expecting of us to be more effective and to comply with this framework that the Texas Education Code requires.
Mhm.
So when you have things like that, if you give us what the public is wanting, then that helps us as well.
Mhm.
But visiting all the campus and talking to the teachers or the administrators at each campus, I mean, I think that's gonna help us also.
Mhm. I think that's a really important piece of all of this, because you're absolutely right, they're the ones who see it on a daily basis and how it plays out. I'll say a couple of things. I don't know exactly how this committee, I know this committee is relatively new, and I don't know exactly how this has worked in adopting policies, but I think.
It's a work in progress.
It's perfect. But I think there are a couple pieces that are where the board and the administration have to work together on these things. I think when we do create a policy recommendation for you to consider, there has to be due diligence and homework that we have done as an administrative team. That's us talking to those principals and those teachers and giving feedback and developing the best policy possible. And then you get to the point where you do a first reading and you have some discussion about it and the why behind it and everything, and then you have a period of time before it's adopted again. And that opportunity to have that window of time where you've done an initial data gathering from our administrative team to give you a good thing to consider, and then an opportunity for some feedback along the way before you get to final policy adoption, I think is an effective way that it should work, and I think that's what y'all were working on here. And I think that one of the things that's most important for you is to be able to have trust that we as an administrative team are out there doing that exact thing, right? That when we're proposing something to you, it's not us just dreaming something up in our office, that we're actually out there trying to get the best sense of what are other school districts doing, what's gonna best serve our students, what's gonna best serve our staff, and then provide you a policy
Right,
recommendation.
I think when we rubber stamp things, the only thing that I would like in those situations is that I make an informed rubber stamping.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And then we have to rubber stamp a lot of things for efficiency purposes.
Yeah,
We can't possibly, have a dialogue on everything that comes through, we just can't. We have to trust the judgment of you and then your team to bring things to us like that.
I had a great experience in a former district where we sat down and we had a policy committee together, and we sat down and we really got into the meat of a curriculum policy. I think it's policy EF or EG, I can't remember which one it is now, it changed. And it was the local policy on curriculum, and it took a long time. I mean, we're talking months of dialogue and drafts and to get it to a point for a whole board to consider. We can't do that with every policy, because you've seen how thick our policy manuals are. That those are the types of things that you frankly pay us for, right? You want us to be able to help do some of those things. But I think picking the most important policies for us to do a real deep dive with a committee of the board and the administrative team working side by side makes a whole lot of sense, because then you're focusing on the things that matter the most. But again, we're not gonna know the things that matter the most until we have some agreed upon direction as a school district. And then after that, being able to say, okay, if we really want this for Belton ISD, then what policies should we really examine the most in our school district? And then this committee would probably be the key group to really dive into those policies.
And I think it's gonna take us a while, I don't know what you guys think, it's gonna take us a while where we develop a framework for this committee
Yeah.
on how we address things, because we just started this thing.
Right.
Okay, we just started it, so hopefully after we've done it for a while, we can leave a procedure in place that other boards can use in the future,
Yeah.
so they can hit the ground running with it.
I think the other role of the board in this is to get to a point where you feel comfortable with the process that the administration is using. Because, like we said, we can't go through everything, but if you're comfortable with the process that we use to gather the information to present you the policies, and that we're adequately getting public comment through everything, then and you're able to dive into a couple of key policies, because governance is really taking a look at policy, then I think that would be a very healthy relationship that we would have in how the board and administrative team could work
Right.
together on this stuff.
One thing that I would like to add to our agenda in every meeting is that, you know how we do at the end of our meetings where we say, is there anything for future consideration that you'd like to add? As opposed to just kind of throwing it out there, next week or the following. I think while we're discussing things, that we should have a point in our discussion before we end the discussion in our meetings. Something comes up, like what you said about looking at bringing some folks in to give us some training. We're gonna look into that in the future. We have that as part of our agenda at some future meeting.
Yep.
So I think we should have that at the end of the meeting, where we actually, hey, while it's fresh on our minds, you know what, I'd like to, maybe not next time, but maybe later on, we can have this discussion about that and bring us some information in the future. How do y'all feel about that?
Mhm.
Okay. I don't know, Matt, I don't know if there's anything else we need to discuss in this. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. This was just, I think Robin had picked this for us to look at.
I'll do a little digging on the exhibit, BVD exhibit, framework for school board development. I wonder if there's a more updated version, but I'm not positive, so
Okay.
I'll do a little digging and
Yeah.
let you all know.
At one point, maybe our first meeting, maybe first and second meeting, we had council here, you know, so, maybe we can let you make that call when
Okay.
when we have these meetings, if there's some legal things that are in here that we need to ask, we have council present, you know, whether it be in person or by phone,
Right,
we'll let you make that call.
okay.
You guys okay with that? All right.
Yeah, I think that, you know, in it always helps to have, other set of eyes and ears from different perspectives
Sure.
and stuff, and especially on things that we're considering changing, you know, we have recommendations, obviously, we don't change legal policy, that's state law.
Right,
But we do have local policy where you as a school board have direction over that, or discretion over that, excuse me. And so if there are things that we're really starting to examine, I definitely think the role of council is helpful in all of
yeah,
that.
and council for the purposes, I mean, if it's state law, administrative law, whatever, just to make sure it's written properly in
Right.
here.
Right.
And we don't want any mistakes in here when it comes to that, you know, if something's stated there and that's the law, then we wanna make sure that it's stated correctly.
Right,
And just like this legislative session, if something in here that hasn't been changed and it needs to be changed, then we need to make sure of that, okay?
and unfortunately, we're gearing up for another cycle in another year on all of that, so it's a never-ending cycle when it
Yeah.
comes to that.
You know, and Todd, you're here, I mean, personnel, you've got a lot of jobs to fill here with our new school coming up, and if there's an impediment on things in terms of our policies that we have, that we can assist with, I mean, that's why we're doing this.
Right.
You know, so, you know, you being in charge of personnel, I mean, I know how difficult that can be, especially in a situation like this, filling out, juggling, you know, teachers here and there, and if there's an impediment to you doing your job, then we're not gonna know unless you communicate that to Matt, and it says, hey, what do you guys think about this, this is what we need to change, to make things more effective, more efficient.
Sounds good.
Anything else, Rosie, Chris, we need to? No. Anything in particular about this particular meeting, Matt, that you want me to bring, the report to the board?
I think it'd be good to make sure that you share your sentiments about, hey, how do we get better at being better together?
Right.
And that we have that discussion coming up, and we make sure that is a opportunity for us to not just move forward, but to also have a little discussion. So
Yeah.
I'll also, when we're crafting the next agenda, I'll
Right.
keep that in mind as well.
You and Mike talked about football, it's kinda like you give me a play, and I go into the game, and I don't know what I need to do. I don't wanna feel like that,
Right.
you know, I mean, we wanna contribute. You know, we wanna do a good job for this district, and I think that's part of it,
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
okay? Well, I guess we'll, if, that'll be noted in the minutes, that way I'll remember, I didn't take any notes here, that way I'll remember.
So I wanna make sure we publicly thank Connie. So, Connie, I know has not been involved in these meetings in the past, but I, very beggingly asked her to be a part. I don't do the best job of taking notes when I'm in the middle of dialogue and stuff, and to have somebody capture the minutes, I think is important for
It's
us.
hard to do.
And so I'm very thankful for Connie being here too, so.
We appreciate you, Connie, very much. Elizabeth, we appreciate you too.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, folks, I guess we'll stand adjourned.
Thank you.